In a blatant display of political manoeuvring, the ANC-EFF coalition in Ekurhuleni is facing accusations of deliberately obstructing critical council proceedings, thereby preventing the approval of a vital compliance item and the long-awaited institutional review of the city. The ANC's alliance with the EFF has seemingly backfired as their speaker, or their appointed speaker, Nthabiseng Tshivhenga, is accused of orchestrating disruption to evade the adoption of the institutional review. ActionSA vows to report the EFF Caucus to Tshivhenga to the ethics committee for alleged disruption and hindering a critical institutional review overdue by 2 years. The review is vital for addressing top management issues and improving service delivery in Ekurhuleni. We are now joined by Siyanda Makhubo, who is ActionSA's caucus leader in Ekurhuleni. A bit later on, we will be speaking to the EFF as well. They're actually right here in studio, but we will be speaking to them a bit later on. Good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning, Aldrin, and thank you for having us.
You're calling it an unholy alliance between the EFF as well as the ANC. What's the issue?
So what's happening in the city of Ekurhuleni is rather sad, Aldrin, and viewers at home, because you are having an unholy alliance between the EFF and the ANC. We have seen the destruction of service delivery in the city of Ekurhuleni. We have also seen morale of staff and officials in the city declining at a very sharp rate. And the events of council last week were evident of this, where the EFF Speaker of Council orchestrated a collapse of council meeting. We know for a fact that the EFF is not happy with the institutional review, which was supposed to have been tabled last week. A very critical report to ensure that the city has an efficiency in delivering services and making sure that we have a top management structure that actually works for residents.
Yeah. Why do you say it was orchestrated?
We know it was orchestrated because there are certain deliveries within the institutional review that the EFF would have wanted within their coalition. The institutional review speaks to the restructuring of the city to make sure that there's the efficiency of delivering services. Currently, right now, the coalition of the ANC and the EFF enjoys a 5-5 share of splits of departments. And what the institutional review, the draft institutional review report that we received last week in council, suggests to us that there are certain departments and certain functionalities which would be taken away from the EFF portfolios and largely sponsored into the ANC portfolios. And we know it's an open secret. The EFF is unhappy about this because their share of power is the share of departments and certain functionalities. And for that reason, we know for a fact that they orchestrated the collapse of council, and the speaker was fundamental and instrumental in that collapse.
Yeah, but now reporting the speaker to the ethics committee, what do you think would come out of that?
So what we're basically doing is we're saying that the speaker failed to preside over council meeting, that we suspect and are confident with the fact that she orchestrated the collapse of council. So what we're basically saying is that the speaker's decision to adjourn council must be reviewed. And added on top of that, there was a multi-party coalition last week where all party leaders agreed to reconvene within the next 7 days. Today is day 7. Yep. And she sent out a circular yesterday without any explanation whatsoever that she would not reconvene council today. So what we're saying is that the ethics committee within the city of Ekurhuleni must subject her to a review process that will test whether her decision to adjourn council meets the threshold as council rules. Because look, Aldrin, postponing and cancelling scheduled meetings means that it is fruitless and wasteful expenditure for the city. It takes thousands to put together a council meeting. It takes time and effort from officials, and we need an explanation from the speaker, and the speaker must come out to explain why she did not reconvene council.
Well, considering that, as you say, today was the deadline for the 7-day postponement, and now that there was the circular that was issued late last night, I don't know, what time did you get it?
We would have received it at 5 p.m.
At around 5 p.m.
Yeah.
But the expectation was that actually council will be reconvening tomorrow. What's the next step outside of the ethics committee, because council still needs to sit and the institutional review still needs to be voted on?
Part of the November council meeting, which was meant to sit last week, would have had the institutional review, where the city is already 2 years late in tabling that report. There was the annual financial statement, which comes from the Auditor General, which the then council needs to approve and to dissect to ensure that the Auditor General audited the city's finances correctly. Thirdly, there were other compliance issues. We received quarterly reports, and we're meant to receive Q1 reports in November, so that part of those reports are then subjected to council and then they're approved, and that we actually do what's required from us as council, passing bylaws, making sure that service providers are paid so that we have good services delivered for our residents, and other duties of council. The failure of the Speaker to call council meeting means that the city is then backtracking and against a number of laws and regulations that municipalities and councils have to do. And if ethics committee fails in doing what is right, because we know that, I mean, they're governing together, the ANC and the EFF is governing together, and we know that the ethics committee is also captured in the city. If the process does not bear much fruit, we have other avenues. We can directly petition the Office of the Public Protector, because we are of the view and confident that what's currently happening in the City of Ekurhuleni Council needs external oversight. We can also petition the Gauteng Speaker of the Legislature to also come in and intervene.
And any court action?
We are still testing our internal mechanisms, and if those internal mechanisms fail, we'll obviously be revisiting that.
In the statement that was issued yesterday, you say that it is well known that the EFF is using their MMC positions in the city to create a patronage networks with their preferred suppliers to siphon money back into the EFF. What evidence do you have?
Yeah, look, there's strong allegations and there's strong suggestions, and we receive information from...
So just the allegations, but what evidence do you have?
Yeah, we receive strong evidence and strong suggestions from a number of people, including service providers themselves, who unfortunately have not been paid. And as a result of these service providers not being paid, service delivery in the city of Ekurhuleni has declined. You will remember that sometime in October, the MMC for Finance, Councillor Dunga, who also happens to the EFF Gauteng provincial chairperson, was involved in a blue light scandal in which one motorist sadly died. And one of the allegations which were levied against that was that the vehicle in which he was traveling in is privately owned, was fitted with blue lights, illegally fitted with blue lights, belongs to an external service provider who has recently won tenders worth millions within the city of Ekurhuleni. We as ActionSA decided to open a case so that we open investigations to this case and to test that within the prosecuting authority and to the courts. And I mean, these remain allegations until proven, right? But we are receiving tip-offs, we're receiving emails, we're receiving letters from officials telling us that we have strong evidence to suggest that there's connections and there's collusions with some service providers who are friends and are associations of the EFF.
Yeah, but again, because the emphasis on the statement is that it is well known that the EFF is using the MMC positions in the city to create a patronage network. So it's not an allegation that you're making. You're saying that it's well known.
Yeah.
So what evidence do you have that it is well known?
Obviously,
what's the extent of this patronage network?
No, the extent of this patronage network, and these are allegations.
But your statement doesn't say it's allegations. It puts it across as a matter of fact.
Yeah, well, it's well known within the corridors of officials in the city of Ekurhuleni, officials who are responsible for signing off important contracts, tender contracts. It is also well known within the chambers of council that the EFF, who enjoys specific positions in council, are using those positions to further their patronage.
Do you have any specific contract that you can refer us to?
We're going
to have the EFF representative, and we'll get him to respond to that as well. So any specific contract that you can say, here it is, we received the evidence about this patronage network that is being built to fund the EFF.
Yeah, well, there's serious, strong evidence to suggest that the recent security guards tenders, which was awarded to a group of security companies belonging to an associate and a string of businessmen, has networks and is associates with the EFF. And obviously these remain allegations. We're trying to prove that through the courts, and that's the point of us opening this case with the South African Police Service, to try to test if there is indeed strong evidence and strong evidence to suggest that there is associates with the EFF.
Do you have confidence in the council? Do you have confidence in the mayor, which would be pushing for a motion to collapse council or even to have the recall of the speaker?
Sometime in September, Aldrin, ActionSA released a missing alert specifically for the executive mayor of the city of Ekurhuleni. We do not know what the executive mayor of the city of Ekurhuleni is doing. He's always absent. If he is in council, he's always lost. And we know that the ANC tries to come and rescue him from time to time. He does not take any media interviews. He does not come out to address
Well, I can
members of
attest
the
to
community.
that. I can attest to that.
So we do not have an executive mayor. In fact, we as ActionSA have taken a decision and a stance to call him a puppet mayor, because that is exactly what he is. We have an individual, a warm body that occupies that seat, who gets paid millions of rand, but we don't know what that person does. And we understand the politics, outside of council. We do not have confidence in council. We know that the EFF Speaker has protected MMCs of the EFF specifically on holding them to account, because we also use the principle of the separation of powers, where the Speaker must hold the executive to account, and she's failed in executing those duties. Since she has assumed the position of Speaker, she has presided over chaotic council meetings. Last week, the EFF caucus charged at the DA caucus where 4 councillors, were assaulted, and I know the DA has an open-ended case and that's their own story. But she has presided over a very chaotic, a very disruptive council, and we're unable to hold the executive account as a result of that.
Yeah, but any motion?
The residents of the Ekurhuleni must be assured that we remain a very effective opposition in the city of Ekurhuleni. The conversation of motions is a conversation of numbers. We are a minority party within council, and when you start talking about conversations of motions, the reality is that it is a conversation of numbers. And currently, the ANC and the EFF together hold a majority, and any motion that comes through would need to have conversations with both parties.
Yeah. Do you think that the motion could have been possible if you were to bring on board the Democratic Alliance and all the other smaller parties?
Sure. those conversations must take place. If we really say that we are representing the views of residents as opposition parties.
So why is it not happening?
Aldrin, you need to have good reason enough. We've seen the frivolous motions coming from the city of Johannesburg, and residents are exhausted. There is a fatigue of motions and 5 mayors coming through. And we want to make sure that once we bring a motion, it becomes a good, solid reason enough. And we believe as ActionSA that there's good, solid enough to bring forward a motion against the executive mayor, because his executive has failed to execute their duties. We also believe that there is good reason enough to bring through a motion against the Speaker of Council. So those are conversations that we need to start having with other parties, and start talking with each other and not past each other. And I think that's very important.
Is that a characterization of your relationship with the Democratic Alliance?
Our relationship with the Democratic Alliance in Ekurhuleni remains very cordial. We do talk on issues of communality. We do have discussions where there needs to be discussions, but we remain independent political parties. But there is a sense of respect. There is cordial working relationships with the Democratic Alliance, and it extends to the IFP as well. It extends to the FF+. Interesting enough, most recently it extends to the minority parties who have come forward to say that let's have conversations of communality within council, as we can see that things are not going as they should within the city of Ekurhuleni.
Siyanda Makhubo, thank you so much for your time. That is the caucus leader of ActionSA in the Ekurhuleni Metro. But later on, we will be hearing from the EFF. We'll give them an opportunity for a right of a reply.